Grammarly.com Unlimited Drama Series.
The burner phone fell from Erica's purse like a dead bird hitting pavement, and in that moment, I knew my marriage was roadkill. My name is David Locke, and I used to think I was the luckiest bastard in Charleston, 37 years old, environmental engineer with calloused hands and a decent salary, married to a woman who could stop traffic with her smile. Erica had this way of lighting up a room that made every man want to be me and every woman want to be her. Too bad I didn't realize she was lighting up more than just rooms. Our mansion sat on Laguerre Street like a grand old dame with secrets rotting in her bones. 3 stories of antebellum charm, complete with wraparound porches and Spanish moss that whispered lies in the evening breeze. Most people assumed we were house poor, stretching every penny to maintain the facade. They had no idea about the trust fund gathering dust in offshore accounts, or that my late grandfather had been one of Charleston's most ruthless real estate moguls. I preferred it that way. Let them think I was just another working stiff who got lucky in love. The phone had clattered across the marble foyer when Erica's designer handbag tipped over. She was upstairs, probably in the shower, washing off whatever she'd been doing all afternoon at her client meetings. I picked up the device, a cheap flip phone that definitely wasn't her iPhone 14. My hands shook as I opened it. The text messages read like a bad romance novel written by a horny teenager. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. Dabs. Dave suspects nothing. Meet me at the greenhouse midnight. Dabs suspects nothing. Meet me at the greenhouse midnight. Simon Vance. I should have known. The guy ran some bullshit eco-consulting firm that probably existed solely to bilk naive environmentalists out of their money. 6'2" of spray-tanned muscle wrapped in expensive suits that couldn't hide his complete lack of substance. He drove a Tesla, not because he cared about the environment, but because it made him look progressive to the soccer moms he was always trying to impress. I'd met him at one of Erica's networking events 6 months ago. He'd spent the entire evening bragging about his CrossFit routine and dropping names of celebrities he'd supposedly trained. Even then, I'd noticed how his eyes lingered on my wife's ass when he thought I wasn't looking. Dave, what are you doing down there? Erica's voice drifted from upstairs, honey-sweet and completely fake. I slipped the phone back into her purse. Just checking the mail, sweetheart. Sweetheart. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. She appeared at the top of the staircase, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair was still damp, and she had that post-shower glow that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me nauseous. You look tired, she said, descending the stairs with practiced grace. Maybe you should get some rest. I'm having dinner with Tara and Mel tonight. Girl talk, you know how it is. Tara and Mel, her enablers. Tara was a real estate agent who looked like a Botox experiment gone wrong, and Mel worked in marketing for some boutique firm downtown. Both of them treated me like I was invisible furniture that occasionally made inappropriate jokes. Sure thing, I said. I'll probably just order pizza and watch Netflix. She kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume mixed with something else. Something musky and masculine that definitely wasn't my cologne. Don't wait up, she said, grabbing her purse and keys. We might make it a late night. After she left, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my study, staring at the oil painting of my grandfather that dominated one wall. Harold Locke had been a son of a bitch, but he'd been smart about it. He'd built an empire by buying up half of Charleston's historic district when it was still considered the bad part of town, then waiting for gentrification to make him rich beyond imagination. What would you do, old man? I asked the painting. The answer came to me like a whisper from the grave. I'd destroy them. But first, I needed proof. Real proof, not just text messages that could be explained away. Miss Jean had worked for my family since before I was born. She was 73 years old, built like a linebacker, and had eyes that missed nothing. She also had a key to every room in the house, and a talent for appearing at exactly the right moment. Mr. David, she said the next morning, setting my coffee down with more force than necessary. I found something in the laundry that don't belong to you. She pulled a tube of lipstick from her apron pocket. Bright red, expensive looking, definitely not Erica's usual shade. Found it in a man's jacket pocket. Gray suit, smelled like that cheap cologne they sell at the mall. Simon's jacket. He'd been in my house, in my bedroom, probably in my bed. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. Thank you, Miss Jean, she nodded curtly. Your grandfather, God rest his soul, He never would have stood for this kind of disrespect, just saying. That afternoon, I called my old college roommate Felix Martinez. Felix was the kind of lawyer who specialized in making rich people's problems disappear, and he owed me more favors than either of us could count. "Dave, you sound like shit," he said when he picked up the phone. "I need your help. Erica's cheating, and I want to nail her to the wall." A pause. "You sure about this? Divorce is messy, especially when there's money involved." "I'm sure. Can you meet me tonight?" "Where?" "The Griffin, back booth. And Felix, bring your recorder." The Griffin was the kind of bar where lawyers and politicians went to make deals they couldn't make in daylight. Dark wood, darker secrets, and a bartender who'd been deaf and blind for 30 years. Felix was already waiting when I arrived, nursing a whiskey and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He was shorter than me, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that made juries nervous. "Talk to me," he said. I told him everything: the phone, the lipstick, the late-night meetings. He listened without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a legal pad. "Here's the thing," he said when I finished. "South Carolina's a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect alimony and property division. The problem is proving it. I can get proof." "How?" I smiled. "Leave that to me." The next day, I told Erica the first he'd be attending a conference in Atlanta for the weekend. Environmental engineers, sustainable development, boring as hell. The kind of thing that would make her eyes glaze over. "That's great, honey," she said, not looking up from her laptop. "I'll probably just stay in, catch up on some reading." Reading, right. I drove to the airport, parked in long-term parking, then took a taxi back to the house. By 6 p.m., I was hidden in the old carriage house behind the main building, watching the back entrance through a pair of binoculars I'd bought at a sporting goods store. At 8:30, Simon's Tesla pulled into the driveway. He was dressed like he was going to a nightclub: tight black t-shirt, designer jeans, enough cologne to choke a horse. He strutted up to the back door like he owned the place, and Erica let him in wearing nothing but a negligee that I'd bought her for our anniversary. They didn't even make it upstairs. I watched through the kitchen window as they went at it on the granite countertop, like animals in heat. Simon's hands were all over her, and she was moaning loud enough to wake the dead. At one point, she looked directly at our wedding photo on the refrigerator and laughed. That laugh broke something inside me that I didn't even know could be broken. I took pictures, lots of pictures. Then I went back to the carriage house and waited. They moved to the greenhouse around midnight, just like the text message had promised. The greenhouse was my grandfather's pride and joy, a Victorian-era monstrosity filled with rare orchids and enough humidity to make you feel like you were drowning. It also had excellent acoustics. God, I can't wait until we're rid of him, Erica panted between kisses. "Soon, baby," Simon replied. "Once you file for divorce, we'll take him for everything he's worth. Stupid bastard probably doesn't even have a good lawyer. He's so pathetic. Do you know he actually thinks I love him? He still brings me flowers every Friday like we're teenagers." They both laughed at that. The sound echoed through the greenhouse like breaking glass. Had what I needed. 2 weeks later, I threw a party. Not just any party, a full-blown charity gala for the Charleston Environmental Foundation, complete with a jazz quartet, an open bar, and enough high society types to fill a country club. The invitation list included everyone who was anyone in Charleston's social scene, plus a few carefully selected members of the press. Erica was in her element, floating through the crowd in a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. She introduced Simon to everyone as her business associate, and he played the part perfectly: charming, handsome, and completely full of shit. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, tapping my champagne glass to get everyone's attention, "thank you all for coming tonight. As you know, the Charleston Environmental Foundation has been working tirelessly to preserve our city's natural beauty for future generations." Polite applause. Erica beamed at me from across the room, probably thinking about how much money she'd get in the divorce settlement. Tonight, I want to share some exciting news about our latest project, a comprehensive study of local businesses and their environmental impact. We've been investigating several companies to ensure they meet our strict standards for ecological responsibility. Simon's smile faltered slightly. Good. In fact, we've discovered some fascinating information about Vance Environmental Consulting. Now I had his full attention. The color drained from his face like water from a broken dam. It seems Mr. Vance's company has been claiming tax credits for environmental projects that don't actually exist. Phantom solar installations, fictional recycling programs, imaginary carbon offset initiatives. Quite impressive, really. The crowd murmured. Someone in the back pulled out their phone, probably already typing up a social media post. Of course, fraud is a serious accusation, I continued, which is why I've already forwarded all of our findings to the appropriate authorities. Simon tried to push through the crowd toward me, but Felix appeared out of nowhere and blocked his path. "You son of a bitch," Simon snarled, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is there a problem, Mr. Vance?" I asked innocently. He lunged at me, but his expensive shoes had no grip on the wet grass around the koi pond. He went down hard, arms windmilling, and landed face first in 3 feet of murky water, with a splash that soaked the front row of guests. The crowd erupted in laughter and camera flashes. Simon came up sputtering, his perfect hair plastered to his skull, his designer clothes clinging to his body like wet newspaper. "You're finished," he gasped, pointing a dripping finger at me. "Actually," I said, "I think you are." Erica grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the exit, her face red with embarrassment. As they reached the gate, she turned back and mouthed the words, "You'll pay for this." I raised my champagne glass in a mock toast. "Looking forward to it, sweetheart." The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, delivered by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Erica was demanding half of everything: the house, the cars, the bank accounts, even my grandfather's antique watch collection. What she didn't know was that she'd just declared war on someone who had been preparing for this battle his entire life. I met Felix at his downtown office, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed expensive legal advice. His conference room had a view of Charleston Harbor that probably cost more per square foot than most people's homes. "She's asking for spousal support," Felix said, sliding the papers across the mahogany table. "50,000 a month for 5 years, plus half of all marital assets. What's she claiming as grounds? Irreconcilable differences, standard no-fault filing. Her lawyer's good. Margaret Thornton, specializes in high-net-worth divorces." Margaret Thornton. I knew the name. She'd represented half the wives in Charleston's messiest divorces, and she had a reputation for leaving her clients' ex-husbands financially gutted. "There's something else," Felix said. "She's claiming you've been hiding assets. Says there's more money than what's showing up in the financial disclosure." I smiled. She has no idea how right she is. "Dave, what aren't you telling me?" I pulled out a folder I'd been keeping in my safe for the past 10 years. Bank statements, investment portfolios, trust fund documents, real estate holdings. Felix's eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. "Jesus Christ, Dave. You're worth $47 million, I said. "Give or take a few $100,000. And Erica doesn't know?" "Nobody knows. Well, except you, now. And Judge Patricia Henley, who's been managing the trust since my grandfather died." Felix leaned back in his chair. "Judge Henley's retiring next month." "I know. She's also the one who's going to be hearing our divorce case. That's convenient, isn't it?" The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing, going through every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence I'd collected. By Sunday night, I had enough ammunition to destroy both Erica and Simon 10 times over. Erica showed up to court looking like a grieving widow, black dress, minimal makeup, tissues clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. Margaret Thornton sat beside her, radiating confidence like a shark that smelled blood in the water. "Your Honor," Thornton began, "my client has been the victim of financial abuse and emotional neglect. Mr. Locke has systematically hidden assets and refused to provide adequate support for his wife's lifestyle." Judge Henley was a silver-haired woman in her 60s who'd seen every kind of bullshit the legal system had to offer. She listened to Thornton's opening statement with the expression of someone who'd heard it all before. "Mr. Martinez," she said, "your response." Felix stood up slowly. "Your Honor, my client has been the victim of adultery, fraud, and emotional abuse. We have extensive evidence that Mrs. Locke has been conducting an affair with Simon Vance, and that both parties have been planning to defraud my client in this divorce proceeding. He handed a thick folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Henley flipped through the pages, her eyebrows rising higher with each photograph. These are quite explicit, Mr. Martinez. Yes, Your Honor. Taken on my client's property, during times when Mrs. Locke claimed to be working late or attending social functions. Erica's face went white. Thornton leaned over and whispered something in her ear, but Erica just shook her head. There's more, Your Honor, Felix continued. We have audio recordings of Mrs. Locke and Mr. Vance discussing their plan to take my client for everything he's worth, as well as evidence that Mr. Vance has been operating a fraudulent business with the intention of hiding assets obtained through this divorce. Judge Henley looked at me over her reading glasses. Mr. Locke, you've been unusually quiet through all of this. I stood up. Your Honor, I've been married to Erica for 8 years. I thought I knew her, thought I could trust her. Finding out that she's been
Her name is saved as electrician. You've been calling the electrician at midnight for 4 months.
How stupid do you think I am?
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
cheating on me with a man who's been stealing from environmental charities. It's been devastating. I understand this is difficult, Henley said. However, we still need to address the issue of asset division. Mrs. Locke is claiming that you've been hiding significant wealth. She's right, Your Honor. The courtroom went dead silent. Thornton looked like she'd just won the lottery, while Felix tried to hide a smile. I have been hiding assets, I continued. Specifically, a trust fund established by my late grandfather, Harold Locke. The current value is approximately $47 million. Erica actually gasped. Thornton started shuffling through papers like she was looking for something she'd lost. However, I said, the trust has very specific conditions. The money can only be inherited by a Locke family member who is either unmarried or married to someone who has demonstrated moral character and fidelity, as defined by the trust documents. Judge Henley was trying not to smile. And Mrs. Locke's adultery would disqualify her from receiving any portion of these assets? According to my grandfather's will, yes. In fact, adultery specifically voids any claim to the trust funds, regardless of state divorce laws. Thornton was on her feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We weren't informed of these assets during discovery. Because they weren't marital assets, Felix replied smoothly. The trust specifically states that the funds remain separate property as long as the conditions are met. Since Mrs. Locke has violated those conditions through her adultery, she has no legal claim to the money. Furthermore, I added, I've decided to donate the entire trust to the Charleston Environmental Foundation, specifically to fund investigations into fraudulent environmental consulting firms. Simon, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, jumped up like his chair was on fire. You can't do that. That money should— Mr. Vance, Judge Henley said coldly, you are not a party to this proceeding. Sit down or leave. He sat down, but his face was purple with rage. Your Honor, I continued, I'm prepared to offer Mrs. Locke a settlement of $500,000 and the house on Laguerre Street, provided she agrees to a non-disclosure agreement and drops all claims to spousal support. Erica looked like she'd been slapped. $500,000 was more money than most people would see in a lifetime, but it was pocket change compared to what she'd been expecting. My client needs time to consider this offer, Thornton said. You have 24 hours, Judge Henley replied. Court adjourned. As everyone filed out, Erica cornered me in the hallway. You bastard, she hissed. You planned this whole thing. Actually, I said, you planned this whole thing. I just played better chess. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Take the settlement, Erica. It's more than you deserve. She stormed off, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Simon followed her, shooting me a look that could have melted steel. I smiled and waved goodbye. They didn't take the settlement. Instead, Erica and Simon decided to go nuclear. Within a week, rumors were flying around Charleston's social circles like poisonous confetti. I was supposedly gay, impotent, abusive, mentally ill, whatever story they thought would stick. Tara and Mel were their primary weapons. Tara used her real estate connections to spread gossip at open houses and country club lunches, while Mel leveraged her marketing contacts to plant stories in local blogs and social media. The problem was, they'd underestimated how much people in Charleston hated outsiders who tried to play dirty. Simon wasn't from Charleston. He'd moved here from Atlanta 5 years ago, and he'd never quite fit in with the old money crowd. He was too flashy, too obvious, too desperate to impress. And now he was trying to destroy one of their own. Big mistake. My neighbor, Mr. Bishop, was 82 years old and had lived on Laguerre Street since the Eisenhower administration. He was also the unofficial gossip coordinator for the entire historic district. That boy's been asking questions, he told me over the fence one afternoon. Going around to all the neighbors, trying to get dirt on you. Offered Mrs. Patterson $500 if she'd say you were abusive to your wife. What did Mrs. Patterson say? She told him to go to hell, then called me to warn everyone else. Word's gotten around pretty quick. Nobody's talking to him. The tide was turning, but I wanted to make sure it became a tsunami. I called a meeting with Tara and Mel at a coffee shop downtown. They showed up looking nervous, like they knew they'd picked the wrong side but weren't sure how to switch teams. Ladies, I said, we need to talk. Tara was fidgeting with her purse strap. Dave, I hope you know this isn't personal. Erica's our friend, and we're just trying to support her through a difficult time. By spreading lies about me? We're not, Mel started. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Their voices came through crystal clear. Dave's probably been hiding money for years. I bet he's got accounts in the Cayman Islands or something. Erica says he never touched her. Like, never. She thinks he might be gay. Well, that would explain the separate bedrooms, and why he spends so much time with that lawyer friend of his. Both women went pale. That's from last Tuesday, I said, at the wine bar on King Street. You were sitting at table 7, drinking Pinot Grigio, and talking loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. How did you record you? Easy. I hired a private investigator to document the harassment campaign you've been running against me. Turns out defamation is still illegal in South Carolina. I slid 2 legal documents across the table. These are cease and desist orders. Keep spreading lies about me, and you'll be explaining yourselves to a jury. Tara's hands were shaking as she read the papers. Dave, we're sorry. We didn't mean. Yes, you did. But here's the thing. I'm prepared to forgive and forget if you're willing to tell the truth about what you've actually seen. They looked at each other like drowning women who'd just been thrown a life preserver. What do you want us to do? Mel asked. Tell people what you really know. That Erica's been cheating with Simon for months. That they've been planning to take me for everything I'm worth. That Simon's business is a fraud. But Erica will never forgive us. Erica's not going to be in a position to hurt anyone much longer. Trust me on that. They agreed. Within 48 hours, the gossip mill had completely reversed direction. Now the story was about poor Dave Locke, betrayed by his cheating wife and her con artist boyfriend. But I wasn't done yet. Simon's gym was called Apex Fitness, and it was exactly what you'd expect. All chrome and mirrors and overpriced equipment. He spent every morning there, working out and trying to pick up women half his age. I showed up on a Thursday at 10 a.m., right during the busy period when all the trophy wives and personal trainers were there. Simon, I called out as he finished a set of bicep curls. We need to talk. He turned around, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Good. I don't have anything to say to you, he said, but his voice cracked slightly. That's okay. I have plenty to say to you. The gym had gone quiet. Everyone was pretending to work out while actually listening to every word. I know about the fake environmental projects, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The solar installations that don't exist. The recycling programs that are just empty warehouses. The carbon offset credits you've been selling to companies for projects you never completed. You're crazy, he said. But sweat was beading on his forehead. Am I? Because the FBI doesn't think so. They raided your office yesterday. Didn't you get the memo? That was a lie. But Simon didn't know that. His face went white, and he actually stumbled backward into a weight rack. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him a news article, one D had Felix plant with a friendly reporter. The headline read, Local Environmental Consultant Under Investigation for Fraud. Page 2 of the Post and Courier, I said, right next to the weather forecast. Simon grabbed the phone and read the article, his hands shaking. It was all true. I'd made sure of that by providing the reporter with copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. This is your fault, he said. You set me up. No, Simon. You set yourself up. I just documented it. He swung at me then, a wild haymaker that any 12-year-old could have dodged. I stepped aside, and he went stumbling past me, crashing into a row of treadmills and going down hard. The entire gym erupted in laughter. Someone started recording with their phone, and I knew the video would be all over social media within an hour. Stay away from me, I said as he struggled to get up. Stay away from my house. Stay away from my friends. And definitely stay away from my wife. What's left of her anyway. I walked out of the gym, feeling like I'd just won the lottery. The charity gala was supposed to be Erica and Simon's last stand. They'd somehow gotten themselves invited, probably by bribing someone on the organizing committee, and they planned to make a public scene that would embarrass me in front of Charleston's elite. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning this night for months. The gala was being held at my house, which should have been their first clue that something was wrong. But desperation makes people stupid, and they were both desperate. The guest list read like a who's who of Charleston society. Judges, politicians, business leaders, old money families who'd been running this city since before the Civil War. These were people who valued discretion, loyalty, and above all, not making a fool of yourself in public. Erica arrived fashionably late, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She looked stunning, and she knew it. Simon was right behind her, dressed in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. They made their entrance like they were walking the red carpet at the Oscars, all smiles and confidence. A few people turned to look, but most just ignored them. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, tapping my champagne glass, "thank you all for coming tonight. As many of you know, the Charleston Environmental Foundation has been investigating fraud in the environmental consulting industry." I had their attention now. Erica's smile faltered slightly, and Simon looked like he wanted to run. "Tonight, I'm pleased to announce that our investigation has led to criminal charges being filed against Vance Environmental Consulting and its owner, Simon Vance." A murmur went through the crowd. Someone in the back started applauding, and soon the entire room was clapping. "But that's not why we're here," I continued. "We're here to celebrate the power of truth and the importance of loyalty." I nodded to Felix, who was standing by the main entrance. He opened the doors, and Miss Jean walked in carrying a silver tray with something covered by a white cloth. "Some of you may have heard rumors about my personal life recently," I said. "Stories about my marriage, my character, my business dealings. Tonight, I want to set the record straight." Miss Jean set the tray down on the main table and pulled away the cloth, revealing a stack of photographs and a small recording device. These photographs were taken in my greenhouse, on my property, by my wife and her lover. The recordings document their plan to defraud me in our divorce proceedings. Erica tried to push through the crowd toward me, but Judge Henley, who was attending as a guest, stepped in front of her. "I think you've done enough damage, dear," the judge said quietly. Simon was backing toward the exit, but Mr. Bishop and 3 other neighbors were blocking his path. "The truth is," I said, "I've been the victim of a conspiracy designed to destroy my reputation and steal my family's legacy. But thanks to the support of this community and the power of evidence over lies, justice has prevailed." I raised my glass. "To Charleston, where loyalty still means something." The crowd erupted in applause. Erica was crying now, her makeup running down her face in black streams. Simon looked like he was about to throw up. "There's one more thing," I said as the applause died down. "Effective immediately, I'm donating my grandfather's entire estate to the Charleston Environmental Foundation, with the stipulation that the money be used to investigate and prosecute environmental fraud." That got another round of applause, even louder than the first. "The donation is valued at $47 million. The applause became a standing ovation. People were cheering, whistling, and clapping like they were at a football game. Through it all, Erica and Simon stood frozen in the middle of the crowd, completely destroyed. Their reputations were in ruins, their conspiracy exposed, their future together reduced to ashes. As the crowd began to thin out, Erica approached me one last time. "You win," she said quietly. "Are you happy now?" I looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. She was still beautiful, but it was the kind of beauty that was all surface, with nothing real underneath. "No," I said, "but I'm free." She nodded and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Simon followed her like a whipped dog, his head hanging in shame. I never saw either of them again. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Erica got the settlement I'd originally offered, $500,000 and the house. She moved to Atlanta, where Simon was serving 18 months in federal prison for environmental fraud. I bought a smaller place downtown, closer to the foundation's offices. Miss Jean came with me, of course. She said someone had to keep an eye on me, make sure I didn't do anything stupid. The foundation grew into one of the most respected environmental organizations in the Southeast. We investigated dozens of cases of fraud and corruption, and we helped put several criminals behind bars. But more importantly, we helped restore faith in the idea that the truth still mattered, that loyalty was still valuable, and that sometimes the good guys actually won. I never remarried. Didn't see the point. I had my work, my friends, and my memories of a grandfather who'd taught me that the best revenge wasn't getting mad. It was getting even, and I'd gotten very even indeed. On quiet evenings, I'd sit on my new porch with a glass of bourbon and think about that night in the greenhouse, when I'd first heard Erica laugh at our wedding photo. That laugh had broken something inside me, but it had also freed something else. Something harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous than the trusting fool I used to be. Charleston's a small city, and word travels fast. Everyone knew the story by now, how Dave Locke had outplayed his cheating wife and her con artist boyfriend, how he'd donated a fortune to charity rather than let them steal it, how he'd turned the tables on everyone who'd underestimated him. I'd become something of a legend, the quiet guy who'd kept his mouth shut and his cards close to his chest until the moment was right to destroy his enemies completely. And people treated me differently now, with respect, with caution, with the kind of deference reserved for someone who'd proven they weren't to be messed with. I liked it. The skeleton key to my grandfather's legacy hadn't been hidden in some dusty safe or buried in legal documents. It had been inside me all along, waiting for the right moment to unlock the power I'd inherited from a man who'd built an empire by never letting anyone see him coming. Erica and Simon had thought they were playing chess with an amateur. They'd found out too late that they were actually playing with a grandmaster.